Hey class, I'm here to just give you guys a proper demo and a video for you guys to rewatch to use as an example for the slab box project. So I'm going to go through all the steps on what you need to do for this project, whether you were here for the first demo or not. This should at least give you some ideas for what you need to do when it goes to constructing it from start to finish basically. So what I'm going to show you first is just grabbing a large amount of clay. You guys need, probably close to 5 or 6 pounds of clay. This is probably over that. And then just wedging this all together. So I'm going to wedge this together and I'm going to show you how to use the slab roller, and then we'll get going on constructing the pot a little bit. So a large chunk of clay like this takes a little bit of time to wedge, but it's worth it to get all the air bubbles out and get it prepared for the slab roller. So just like we use the wedge table for our wheel throwing projects, this is the same thing in idea. And basically what you need to do after you feel like it's been wedged enough is start to get it into a larger pancake shaped slab so it can actually run through the slab roller. I would say this can be anywhere from 2 to 3 inches thick, but I wouldn't throw anything thicker than that through the slab roller. Kind of gotta get it somewhat prepared and ready for that. Alright, so this looks pretty good to me. So it's a larger chunk like this. I'm going to move us over to the slab roller so you can see exactly how I do this part. So I'm going to bring that large chunk of clay over to our slab roller. Hopefully the canvas is already ready for you like this. It should be hanging over the top. Otherwise, just pull it over like this and flap it over before you put it down. Flap it back over when you're ready to roll. My recommendation for width, and that is right here, is about 1/2 inch or a little bit less than 1/2 inch to make a good size slab for this. So yeah, anywhere between, somewhere a little less than 1/2 inch is about perfect. Otherwise it just gets a little too thick. So all you need to do at this point is shove the clay, just kind of help it through a little bit and start pulling the wheel towards yourself. Until you don't need to anymore. It's run all the way through. And this part's a little hard because you have a large chunk clay to move. And just bring this over to your table. And we'll move back here. All right. So once we have it here, it's pretty simple. All we mainly need to do is measure, and it completely depends on what kind of slab box you want to make. I'm going to demo you guys a square slab box so that you have an idea of just kind of how to make a basic box. But from there, you could make a 3-sided box. You could make it any organic shape that you'd want. You can make a template to design your own box in your own way. You can get really creative with the shape and form of the box you want to make. But we'll just kind of demo a nice standard easy box. So I'm going to work with basically, let's see here. I'm going to make a 5 by 5 inch box for the most part. And I need at least 6 squares, right? Because I'm trying to make a box that has a side on each side and then a lid and then a top. So I need to make at least 6 squares here. So I'm going to start by measuring from here. I'm just going to measure all the way down my ruler to about 18 inches. I'll follow that line up, going a little bit further. And I use my ruler to measure out 5 inches. So 5, 10, 15, and then I'll just make a couple extras here. Okay, now moving down, we just need to, let's see, gonna measure 5 inches down as well. Make that mark. And when you're using a ruler, just like you would on paper, make sure things are lined up and parallel to each other. Like for example, this line right here is parallel to the end of the clay and the mark that I've made. So that way it's parallel to my line at the top. Follow that through. Make my marks just to make sure I'm on. And then from here, you just need to mark or line up your two lines together. Make another parallel line. So these are nice and square and will be easy to match up. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to set aside the squares I've made, and I was only able to make 5 by 5 squares. I'm going to set them aside. And if that's the case, all you need to do is you could reuse the clay you just used, or go grab another chunk of clay real quick. Get it back in that fashion. Just going to use the slab roller real quick and I'll be right back. And then you could make a couple extras if you'd want to as well. It's probably smart to have at least one extra in case something happens while you're processing it or constructing it. One of the walls doesn't fit the way you want it to, so I have one extra just in case. So now I have 6 walls, or at least 6 squares to work with. Now I can start constructing. Doesn't matter which one you choose, but I just try to choose one that's, you know, one of your better ones as far as it's the right dimensions, looks good, and fits right. And basically from here, you are just using all your other chunks of clay to construct 4-sided box with a lid on the top. So we're going to do that. So basically, your main steps here, especially when you first start, Hand building is you need to slip and score everything. Everything needs to be slip and scored. So I like to use this tool. You can also use a knife or whatever it is that is sharp enough to kind of create a gritty tooth. So this is scoring. I also have my slip right here. And you just need to use a little bit of slip, and that's basically your glue. That's going to help those two pieces of clay glue onto each other and stay well constructed. Seen students skip that step, and down the road it cracks, breaks, doesn't last as long. So just make sure not to skip this step. So this first wall is always kind of weird because you're just putting it up by itself. And it just kind of has to sit there for a bit on its own. But your best tool in hand building is your hands, and you can use this small chunk of clay from the bottom to kind of zip up those seams, both on the outside and on the inside. Something I like to use that I don't have right now, and I'll go grab it, is a banding wheel. That way you can just work on this without actually having to move your clay. This should be the only time I'll have to do that. That way I can see it from all directions without really causing any stress to the clay. You could use like a water bottle or something to make sure this is sturdy, but as long as I get this next wall on somewhat quickly, it should be able to stand fine. Always got to slip and score first though. I got to slip and score 2 walls this time. As well as the inside wall and the base that it's going on. Now I can connect those 2 walls. And it's really smart to just kind of compress those 2 together right off the bat, or anytime you're adding a slab to a slab, or clay to clay really. And once again, you can use this little overhang of clay, if there is one, to kind of clean up those seams, push them together, start to get those things a little bit cleaned up. I always do this from the inside too, because the sooner you do this the better, because it just becomes harder and harder to get inside the more you enclose this. Obviously, use your finger to get wet and just clean up edges as much as possible. You could also put a coil in there if you really wanted to, if your cracks are bigger, if you're worried it's not gonna stay tight. And you have a couple options for cutting over this overhang. Like it'd probably be smarter to make that measurement before it's on, or you can freehand it like this. As long as you're clean and parallel, it should be fine. But now I can start to add some more walls. I'm going to slip and score my base and my side wall here first. And I can do the same to this slab as well. Water on your rib kind of creates its own slip as well, which is nice. A little extra never hurts. Get it nice and wet. It's starting to come together. Got one more wall after this, then I'll show you how to attach the roof, the top, the lid. Compress those together once again. Use your finger or a sponge or some sort of wet tool to clean up those edges while you have the chance. You can always cut off the top a little bit before we add the lid. Zip up this seam in the inside. And then this last one's a little bit different because we just need to fit it in to the walls that we currently have. Cutting off this excess once again. So the way this last one works, you kind of got to eyeball it a little bit, but I like to get it like centered on the base there with a little extra, obviously, whatever width the clay actually is. And then I use my knife tool to do the measuring for me. I just cut from the inside. I know you can't see it really well, but I'm just basically measuring where that wall lines up right here and here. And maybe I need to cut off a little bit off the top too. So I can bring this back down here with my fettling knife. And then maybe trim off just a little bit off the top. And the way this one's different is you're just going to fit it in instead of fit it off the sides, and then you're going to use the walls to kind of enclose it. So I got a bunch of slipping and scoring to do here first. Both on that slab and on the inside of the box. And then dry up your hands a little bit, and then you can fit this right in. Make sure it's parallel, lined up well, and then compress once again. It's pretty lined up at the top now. And you just got to clean up those lines. You could also grab a smooth rib instead of this serrated rib to kind of clean up these lines at the end. I think that would be smart. But a sponge can do a little bit of work for you too. Just get everything smoothed out and cleaned up before I add the top on. Alright, it's looking pretty clean. Just gonna zip up this edge before I add on the lid. Just try to choose a slab that you created that fits nicely. This one does. And then, believe it or not, we're gonna slip and score a bunch. So we're enclosing the whole pot just for a few minutes, or not even. And I'm gonna be able to show you a cool way to create a really nice lid with an overhang on it. So that way, our main concern with the lid is that we don't want it to easily slip off. So we're going to cut it into an angle or put some sort of notch in it so that it sits properly and doesn't come off easily. Forgot, add a little more slip to the top here. Alright, once I'm ready to put this on, maybe choose a side that fits best. That looks a little better. Once again, you get a little more leeway on the top here to add some pressure, and then close up your edges or your seams. Just going around the whole thing. It's my last seam to clean up. It's an important one too. Alright. So everything's enclosed, cleaned up, slipped and scored. It's ready to go. Just getting rid of a little texture from the canvas on the clay. Textures are something we're going to add another day once this is dried up. But between a day or two of class or time, you could easily get the whole box constructed. I don't recommend rushing it as much as I just did. You can take your time on it to make a really good final product. You definitely want the clay to be set up and not really wet when you're first doing it. So maybe roll out your slabs in one day, let them sit in the wet cubbies or in plastic with water on them for one night at least. And then the next day you come in, you can easily come in to construct. So at this point now it's enclosed. My main thing is creating a lid, and you get to design that any way you want. I've seen a lot of creative ideas. You could go a more organic shape where it's kind of wavy and moves. You could do a more geometric shape where it's kind of changing. I'm going to go with a more organic wavy shape. It looks more like that. So right now I'm just outlining. And later, once I know it matches up and fits, which it looks like it does, something like that. Make sure I like it. Then I can go in stab the fettling knife all the way through the thickness of the clay. And this is why the banding wheel is so nice. You don't have to actually touch the clay. You can just rotate it. And there you go. Just gonna slowly take this off, and boom, you have a lid. You don't want to hold that too long, or not work with it, or kind of work with it up in there. Once it's sitting down like this, it's a little more stable and it's not going to get as wonky. But while I have the chance, we haven't had a chance to zip up these seams since it was enclosed. I would do that now, and then the other thing I would do is get all these walls nice and clean with your finger and some water and make it look cleaned up. Get rid of those little extra things off the sides. I can set aside my lid for now and do the same thing here. Sponge does a good job of cleaning up all these edges. And let's say this is the end of your first day, or you're done working with it for now. I think this is a good stopping point to let it set up and kind of dry a little bit overnight. And what I would do is I would always leave the lid that you created on the pot and try to get it lined up as best as possible, or where it used to be. So that way it just starts to kind of naturally sit where it should. And because if you didn't leave it on top of each other, it might kind of dry in a different way or a different direction than you want it to. So I'd always leave it the way it's supposed to be. So if I were to end tonight, I'd finish by just sponging this up, leaving it on a bat, like this, and then I would just easily use a bit of plastic to cover it, especially if you're using the wet cubby. This will keep it nice and moist overnight, and easy to work with the next day or moving forward. So that's your slab box demo, and have fun with it, and good luck.